Welcome to the Lifetime at Work podcast, the podcast about work. We spend so much of our lives at work. How do we make the time count? If you're considering a career change, curious about other jobs, or have a dream of working for yourself and owning your own business one day, this is the podcast for you. My name is Greg Martin, and I'm an entrepreneur, business strategy guy, mergers and acquisitions expert, teacher, and I live in the suburbs of Toronto, Ontario. Every week, I talk to guests from the business world about the happiness and meaning they get from their jobs. The goal is to help you build more meaning, more purpose, and more fulfillment into your work. Today, we're talking about work ethic and just how hard you should work. How do you know how many hours to put in? Should you be spending every waking hour pushing towards your goals, or is there some sort of balance? And that's what today's episode is all about. So let's hear that intro music and get going. If you're a fan of the podcast, please visit us at lifetimeatwork.com. There you can subscribe to the email list and keep up to date with all the things that are going on with the podcast. Also, I would love a review. If you can go to your favorite platform, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, whatever it might be, and leave me a rating, that would go a long way in helping support this project. Did you know I own a prepared meals company? We used to be a restaurant. We are now a prepared meals company, and we're all about providing super easy meals for people in, what is a time where you just can't eat at restaurants and can't eat out nearly as much. So if you go to farmer.ca, farmr.ca, you can keep up to date with us. You can get deliveries pretty much 7 days a week from our various partners to wherever you live. If you live in the greater Toronto area, they're all made by restaurant quality chefs. We use really good ingredients. They're really much better than any of the prepared meals that you would otherwise find probably at the grocery store or wherever you typically buy them. So check them out, farmr.ca. Like I mentioned off the top, this episode is all about work ethic and what that means and really how hard you should work. And two inspirations that I had that I wanted to sort of mention here right now before we get going with our guests is two different sort of perspectives or points of view. There were a couple books that I read and people that I sort of followed right when I was looking for my next adventure in the working world. One was Gary Vaynerchuk, and I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's really an interesting person to go and follow, but he is this intense content machine who just posts Instagram and YouTube video. He's just on everything, and he runs a media company all about really getting online and technology and he's just very aggressive, very abrasive personality, very intense kind of guy. And he's really, when you follow him, he's really all about working hard and putting everything into it. It's kind of like you only have one life, you better work hard and do it and just apply yourself like crazy. And so I resonated a lot with that mentality in some ways because I can see that. I totally feel where he's coming from and appreciate what he's saying. A few weeks later, I decided to have another book and pick up another book, and it was The 4-Hour Workweek by Tim Ferriss. And what's interesting and what's sort of been in my head since then is he presents this very different picture. The 4-Hour Workweek was one of these things that I always thought was just a hokey book because whoever could really have a 4-hour workweek, and would you even want that, and what would that even mean? But the book's really cool. It's actually probably the best business book that I've ever read, I think. And I'd highly recommend it for sure, no matter what situation you're in, because his perspective is all about how you need to create time through your work. And he gives it all these different ways, I guess, to be more efficient with what you're doing and to create more time for yourself to do whatever you want, whatever you're kind of passionate about, whatever your hobbies are, whatever you really want to do with life. It's kind of this perspective of, figure out what you want to do with life and achieve that, and make sure your work is purposeful and all that, but don't let it control you. And so they were these two opposing sort of views in my head that have been around for a while. And I don't know that I've really decided on which one is right. There's no right answer. It's all in the person, and it may change over life, but I really thought about that a lot in doing this interview. This interview today is with a guy named Ricky Rathore, and the reason that I wanted to have him on the podcast was that he's just this incredibly, I'm going to call it intense guy who you just get the sense that he likes to work. When you first meet him, he sort of hits you with this, he's a workaholic kind of guy. But as I got to know him, I realized more and more that workaholic wasn't really the right term. It is, but he just seemed really into it. Like he just seems super passionate about what he's doing, and he's in the real estate game, and he runs a brokerage, and he's also a real estate lawyer, which maybe or maybe not interesting to you. That's really not the point, I think, of this interview. I think the point is to have a look and try to decipher for yourself his passion. Really, when I heard the conversation, I really got the impression that it's more about his love just for this business. I mean, he just really loves coming to work every day. And so I want you to see what you think, and listen to the interview with us and see how he may inspire you about work and what you're doing. It's not that he has a huge passion for real estate that is ingrained in him from a super young age, and he's just doing that. It was sort of this business he fell into and got really into, and just decided he was going to get as much training and as much credentials and as much experience as possible and just immerse himself into it, and he likes that. And he even talks about some other past jobs that he's had that he was really into as well. He just seems to be this guy that really gets into the work. Just a general guy who's very passionate about whatever he's doing. And I think that's helpful. I think it is actually helpful to see this passion, especially when, sometimes at our jobs, and maybe COVID-19 makes that worse, but you kind of can get stuck in them, or you can sort of be thinking, hey, I really want something else, or there's kind of the mentality of the grass is always greener. And so I think it's super helpful to hear from him. Now, Ricky's also this guy who's always suited up. If I remember from the How I Met Your Mother, if you've ever seen that TV show, there's a character on there named Barney, and he's basically always wearing a suit. It's Neil Patrick Harris's character, and Ricky is that guy. I didn't mention it in the podcast. I didn't push him on it, but he's basically always wearing a three-piece suit because he just embodies this, hey, I'm always working, I'm always on, I'm always willing to take a phone call, I'm always here trying to serve my clients. He's just kind of that guy. And it's though that doesn't always resonate with how my philosophy is, it really works for Ricky. And so I want to see what you think, and see what you get out of sort of hearing that from him. The other neat thing about the interview is sometimes I tell my guests to turn off sort of the background music that's going on, or the chimes from their phone and all that. But I did not in this case. I kind of forgot. But Ricky's taking this call from his office, and you can just hear all these different sounds in the background. And I think that's actually really perfect, almost in a poetic way, where that's his life. I think you get much more into who he is and what he's all about by sort of hearing all these sounds. It's just he's being pulled all these different ways. He has all these things going on kind of all the time, and he's not to say he's always distracted. He's focused, but there's always distractions out there and just so much going on that he's trying to juggle. So I know you're really going to enjoy this interview with Ricky. He's a very passionate guy, and I know that his passion's gonna translate onto you. But I'm curious to see how you think and what you believe, sort of in terms of passion and work and all those good things. So here's my interview with Ricky Rathore. So Ricky, thank you very much for joining me on this episode of Lifetime at Work. I wanted to get into a lot of things with you today about just kind of working hard and work ethic, and how hard you should work at your job, or could work at your job, or feel like you kind of can. But I wanted to sort of start off by just sort of asking you about high level what you do, what the company that you run and work at, what do you do, and at a high level, just to give everyone sort of that background.
Hey, Greg, thank you for having me. Absolutely. So, I mean, very high level, I am a real estate broker. I'm also a broker owner of the company. So I run Remax Metropolis, which is an independently owned franchise for Remax. I'm also a real estate lawyer at one of the top 3 law offices operating in real estate law in the Markham region. And I guess, when people generally ask me what I do, I solve real estate related problems. My whole day, my whole career is based on solving problems related to real estate.
Gotcha. And so there's the agent who we all know. We go buy a house or we go buy something, and so you do that.
Yep.
But then you're also a lawyer. So how do you tie those two in? And usually the lawyer part is separate. Like I remember when I bought my house, it was a separate person. They were like, okay, now you have to get a lawyer to do that, and it seemed very paperwork focused and everything to sort of dot all the T's and I's and whatever. But how do you combine those two?
So, I mean, Greg, there's obviously the conflict of interest part of it. So you always want separate people. And
Okay.
I've got a partnership. So my law office is run by me and my partner, Mohammed Baig. And, with the transaction itself, from our agent's perspective or a lawyer's perspective, there is an overlap, right? Because quite frankly, the paperwork that the lawyer uses to close the deal, it's the agreement of purchase and sale. And, I like to reference to that document as a son. everything revolves around it. And so early on in my career, what I found was that, I was drafting agreements and I had third party lawyers that my clients were bringing in or whatever the case may be. And there was a disconnect between the drafting that I was doing and the negotiating and bargaining I was doing in my capacity as an agent relative to what the lawyer was able to do in terms of enforcing the contracts and enforcing those rights and obligations under that agreement.
Okay.
And so the reason I stepped up and got my law degree, and it wasn't supposed to become what it did today. It's interesting how we've got here, but one of the reasons I am where I am is because there was a disconnect between the people that I was dealing with, because I was providing a certain level of service, and then when you were relying on third parties to provide services on the closing end, there was a huge disconnect, right? And so that's kind of what pushed me into the getting the law degree and adding to my arsenal, because it's all about competency at the end of the day. My whole goal is to make sure that the experience when dealing with me or one of my agents or my law office is that you have an unparalleled experience, because we understand the agreement. We, as agents, my partner's an agent as well. We know what agents do. We know what agents negotiate. We understand what the outcome is supposed to be. And therefore, when we're sitting down with a client trying to close their deal and enforce their rights and obligations, we kind of look at it from a different perspective versus a lawyer that just kind of pushes papers all day long, which is what the real estate law profession is for the most part.
Yeah, gotcha. So your business model then is about getting clients who I think are just real estate focused, right? They are, I want to buy a house or I want to sell one or a property of some kind, and then you're sort of this. I will be the real estate point of contact basically for you. Is that kind of how you operate and are sort of running your business?
Yeah, I think that kind of coins it. And at the end of the day, it goes back to the whole notion of us being problem solvers. People will come to us with problems in real estate, whether it's, okay, I need to buy a house, I need to sell a house, I need to rent a house, or whatever the issue may be. We see it as a problem, and then we come to conclusions on solutions and how we can better, present opportunities for the client to achieve their desired outcome, right?
Gotcha.
So it all comes back to it's all things related to real estate, but it's problem solve based. That's how we look at our business, and that's how we've built a very successful business enterprise on the fact that we're always looking to take that service and find the real solutions to the problems that people have, rather than looking at it as a one-off transaction. We know that you might buy now, you may need to sell in the future, and even when people come to sell their home, for example. Before we'll slap up a for sale sign and go through our motions of getting the marketing together and all the other stuff. Sometimes seller will come in and say, Ricky, I want to sell my house. And when you get to talking, what's motivating the sale? What is it that you need to do? What's the goal? What's the outcome that's desired? I've had clients who have said, well, I need to sell the house because I've got a second mortgage that's at 13% interest and it's interest only, and I can't get ahead of the mortgage, right? And so you look at situations like that. So in my capacity as a lawyer, I look at that and it's like, well, have you talked to a mortgage agent? Have you talked to your bank to see if you can potentially refinance the home? Because selling is a solution, yes, but is it the ideal solution for your circumstances? And more often than not, what we find is that it isn't, right? So it goes back to that whole disconnect part. A lot of agents in the business will look at a problem like that and say, well, if I don't list this house and sell it, I won't make my commission. And that's usually the go-to thought for, I can't say all agents, but many agents, at least as far as I can tell you in my dealings in my day-to-day. And I've been in the business almost 15 years now. And so what we educate our agents, what I educate my team members is that, look at what the issue is and see how we can resolve it. Because ultimately there might be, three different solutions. The client only sees, with blinders on, they see the one solution that makes sense to them because they don't have the expertise, they don't have the connections, they don't have the financial wherewithal to bring in the people in the network to help solve their actual issue. Right?
Gotcha. So then you have a bunch of agents that work as part of your, I mean, do you say that they work for you or they just work, they're part of the team that you sort of have as part of your brokerage? And so it's, they're working in your office and as part of your, effectively your company. Is that kind of how it works? And
so I've got now one of the fastest growing REMAX offices in the world. This office ranked number 11 in, I think it was June and July for growth.
Cool.
We were ranked 11, and to give you some perspective, we're competing with markets like California and New York, right?
Yeah.
Where the California population for the state is the equivalent of our whole country's population. So the caliber that we're operating at is a totally different kind of, ball game that we're looking at playing here. Insofar as the relationship with the agents is concerned, yes. So from a legal perspective, I run and operate the company. I am responsible for everything that happens in this company. And in fact, I'm responsible for what my agents are doing on a day-to-day basis. So my title as a broker of record requires that I oversee my agents and I oversee the transactions and I hold my agents accountable to the law as far as the real estate regulations are concerned. So my function today is to oversee, I'd say anywhere between 90 and 100 agents at this time, and make sure that they're doing really what I am passionate about doing, but on a very high level, right?
Yeah.
So we're making a difference now in various communities by having these partnerships with the 90 or 100 agents that we've got at this office now.
Cool. All right. So I may come back to the real estate sort of angle of things, but I wanted to kind of get to the topic probably of today that I sort of feel like I wanted to chat with you most about, which is it's just work ethic. And I think it comes into getting to that. You're talking about how you are one of the fastest growing brokerages and just going really hard at it, clearly, and that takes hard work. And I feel like in sort of knowing you and following what you're doing, even social media and everything that you're have going on, part of your brand really, because real estate seems like it's it's all about the brand and you as a person. You see on every single sign there's someone's face. It's very much this person. Right. And it really seems like part of your persona is I'm going to work the hardest for you. I am the hardest working guy. Like I'll answer your call when you need it, even on the weekend, even in the evening, even whenever. I'm sort of there to help you, like you said, in any times. Is that accurate? Do you sort of feel like that is what you are striving for? Because that's what it comes across to me as.
Yeah. So, I mean, there's different cycles, I guess, as far as my career's been concerned. Like, in the beginning, when I started out as a sales agent for another RE/MAX office, before I was a broker owner, before I got into this whole thing from a career perspective, yeah. I was 18. I was at Ryerson University doing my undergraduate in business management. And, I wanted to become an architect. I never wanted anything to do with this. Right. And ultimately it was my dad who's like, look, whether you end up using an agent or not, getting an education in real estate is never going to do you any harm, because even if you end up using a third party agent for your own transactions, at least you won't get duped by anybody. Right. And at the very least, if we ever do transactions within the family, hey, at least we can work together and make things happen. Right. So it was never supposed to become this thing. And I remember when I started out, I had spiky hair and earrings, and it was a different mindset. Like life was very different back then. I wasn't motivated to do what I'm doing today. Right. And in the first year, I achieved quite a bit. Like I became a top producing agent at that office, and people were blown away. And I was blown away because before I got into university, I was supposed to be the dumb kid. I was supposed to be the kid that didn't make anything happen, right? Yeah. So I think part of what fueled me to get to where I am today is the fact that I had something to prove, to myself and to my parents and to my peers, that I wasn't some sort of a, lost cause, that I could make a meaningful difference in the lives of my families, my friends, and more importantly, the communities in which I serve, right? So, starting out, it wasn't like, let's work. It was like, okay, let's balance work and do this and do that. And once I got through the schooling and I did all the other stuff, and this became more of a full-time gig, and I started to see the kind of impact that I was able to make on a wider scale, then it became a bit of a passion. Like I became very passionate at that point. Then the whole architecture thing went out the window. and it's like you said, right? Like at that point, I think what happened is that the personal and professional lines start blurring, right? So new agents in my office will ask me, should I, take my Facebook page and make it a commercial one, or should I have a separate one? I'm like, eventually you're going to have difficulty segregating the two. You can't separate the two, because if I'm out, like if I have a get together with you guys or friends or family, 9 out of the 10 times before I'm asked how I'm doing, the question is, how's the real estate market? Right. Yeah. It's just, and it is what it is. And I'm very happy that, people look at me and seek that sort of advice, because they clearly think that I've got information and I'm here to help solve those problems. Right. Right. So at this point, like I do work a lot, yes, but it doesn't feel like work. And I know it's cliche to say, you don't feel like you've worked a day in your life if you love what you do. And yeah, there are elements of that, but I think as life goes on, now I'm married to a lovely wife, and things are changing. Priorities will change a little bit. I know what I've built, and I know what the direction of the companies is going to look like. But I think there's cycles. There's times in life where you go back and forth, and you kind of inject what you need to inject into the business to take it to where you want to go.
Yeah, yeah. Like I feel like a lot of people, they work hard, and or no matter what, you're kind of in this mode where you're like, okay, I want to work hard because if I work hard, I get something out of it, right? It's sort of you have a goal, and you want to fulfill that goal. But I feel like your goal is really tied though to the company, is that you've really become, you've seen growth, and what you are looking for next is to kind of keep growing it and to keep sort of doing more and more and more and more. And I'm intrigued as to sort of, because now there's a certain amount, you've gotten to, you said 90 to 100 agents. There's a certain amount of success that you already have, right? Like that. Do you look back and say to that achievement and say, and does that give you fulfillment? Do you say like, oh, that's great, what I've built, like that's amazing? Or is it really sort of the next thing that is always sort of motivating you to kind of keep going? Because in theory, you could take the view, you know what, I'm going to, this is a good size firm. It's very manageable. I am now going to just work on trying to make things work efficiently and be less involved and less about growth, but more about just sort of, it operates itself. And did that ever cross your, I feel like it doesn't cross your mind, but does that ever cross your mind as an option?
No,
No.
and it's an interesting question because I'm a very type A type of personality, right?
Yeah.
And it's interesting because when I'm client facing or I'm at the office, like I talk for a living. That's what I do, right?
Yeah.
Versus when I'm home, I'm very quiet. I'm very to myself, and it's because I guess I talk for a living, right? So do I see this becoming a brokerage with 600 agents one day? No, I don't think so, because I think that my goal is to emphasize on quality over quantity, right? And I think what drives me at this point is again the differences that I'm able to make in some of the agents. Like some of the agents that are working in my team are heavy hitting top producing agents now. And to be able to say that I was able to enable this agent to go from say $100,000 in commission to $300,000 in commission, it was because of the support that we were able to provide versus some of our competitors that are strictly a numbers game. They've got 1,000 agents paying $50 a month, and whether they make deals or don't make deals or make a difference or don't make a difference, the brokers' pockets are padded, right?
Yeah.
So I look at this and it's like, sometimes it's funny. I'll talk with my wife, I'll talk with my other partner. And it's like, well, if I went into full-time sales and I shut up the office, I could easily earn $1 million of commission annually without question. And sometimes I look at what I make at the office today and it's like, well, I know that it's not the highest and best use of my skill set, but slowly and surely I am making a difference. And it's not about the money now. It's beyond that. I think now what drives me and motivates me is the founding principles of what this company was built on, and it's servicing the community and making a genuine difference. Because ultimately, you're not going to take this stuff with you. I'm not going to take my car when I'm dead. I'm not taking my money with me. And now it's about the relationships, and it's about the impact, because you can see that impact that we're making on a day-to-day basis. It's in front of us, and I think that's what motivates me more than anything else at this point to do what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's interesting. Do you think though then that you could work for someone else? Like I struggle. I know a lot of people who are, whatever, you're working a corporate job and you have a certain set of tasks for the year, for the day, for however long, and it's sort of a matter of doing it. Now a lot of people will do more than that. They will go above and beyond because they are looking for a promotion or they are looking to get that validation, or they just want to do good at their job. Do you think you could work for someone else in the same vein, and would you be motivated by the same thing, or is a lot of it just tied to the fact that it is sort of your firm and you?
So, I mean, I've been working since I was 16, right? I started out as a factory worker. I've done everything, I've done deliveries. I've worked, in a glue factory. I've done anything you can imagine at this point. I've been in construction. I was a paper delivery boy. Like I did the telemarketing calls. I've seen it
Yeah.
all. And I think ultimately, what drives me and with my personality is that, I don't have a problem working for somebody else or doing my own thing. Ultimately, if our goals align, I will get satisfaction from that. Now, if I'm working for a big corporation where my goals are very different from the corporation's, and I mean, I guess that's where the disconnect is, because when you're working for somebody else, it's different. It's not a partnership. It's like, it's my way or the highway. And for somebody like me, if I don't believe in what I'm doing, if I don't see a meaningful contribution in what I'm doing, then it isn't motivating to me, right?
Yeah.
Whereas what I do now as a, you know, as a business owner, I can see that I'm, you know, my agents aren't my employees. From a legal perspective, yes, you know, if they do something, it's technically us on the hook, but they're business partners. And you look at what they're doing on a day-to-day basis, and our whole business is based on the fact that we're trying to create efficiencies for them. We're trying to take more off of their plate and put it onto our shoulders, because we can deal with administrative and clerical and marketing and all that other stuff. And we want agents to be very high level dealers and specialize in what they do. I like to see agents that only list properties and agents that only do buyer transactions, because they're specialized, they're sophistication.
Yeah.
It's like when you see a lawyer who's advertising, oh, I do criminal law and immigration law and real estate lawyer and real estate. It's like, well, okay, yeah, you could do all those things, but if you were to put that lawyer up against somebody that specializes in criminal, and you have them fight the same case, I'm pretty sure the outcome is going to be very different, right? Um, and it's very interesting when you look at it from that perspective. So yeah, I could work for somebody else. I can see that, you know, I've done it, and I've been able to do it very successfully. I've always been a good employee. I've never, you know, been terminated or fired or anything like that.
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
always managed to, you know, move up in the ranks. And, you know, I think that if I wrapped everything up today and I went into, you know, a Bay Street law office or any other, you know, real estate brokerage where I said, I'm here to work, you know, if the goals align, I have no reservation in helping build that company.
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm trying to. I think I'm like that too as well in a lot of ways. Some of the things that you're saying sort of resonates with me. One being that you know you talk at work all the time, and that's sort of your job, and then when you get home you don't want to. I definitely relate to that. I think there's something about when you're talking about work that is just your area of expertise. You can talk forever about it. You have all these things that you know, and likewise. So when I started my career, it was investment banking, and I spent a long time in that career because I couldn't leave. I liked it in a lot of ways. It was sort of what you're talking about. The challenge for me was that even though I was super busy, I felt success because I was promoted a few times, because I felt like I was doing it. People told me I was doing a good job. I got good reviews. It was all very positive. But I did reach the point where I thought that I needed to do something else more to myself. Like I really felt like at a certain point that it was this. I was doing the same thing over and over and over again. You know,
Mhm.
like and it maybe goes to your point of talking about a lawyer that wants to do a bunch of different things. You just kind of get bored of doing the same thing over and over and over again when you sort of think about that. And so there were other things that I had thought about to do, and I thought, okay, well, I can go back to the world of investment banking and M&A. I'm not that concerned about it, but I'm also curious about what else is out there.
Mhm.
Does that resonate with you in terms of what other people might want, and just as a business owner running it, or are there just, I feel like running your own business, there's enough different things that happen to you all the time that you kind of get that fulfillment through that. Because since then I've been definitely on my own, running a business or two, and it's just all never doing the same thing. Like it's just always these different things. And what do you think about that?
So, I mean, in my mind, I've always believed that if you're not growing, you're dying, right?
Yeah.
But that may not resonate with somebody who's got a family and who's got, bills to pay, and their whole lifestyle is, I got to put my kids through university, right? That's what's on their mind. That's what's important to them at that time, right? So I think when we look at this from a topic perspective, I look at it and I say, I look at myself and I compare myself to my peers, my family members, and other people, and I think that I'm doing what I'm doing based on my priorities in life right now, right? If I had a kid that I had to put through, university and all these other things, and those were my priorities, it might be very different, right?
Yeah.
I can take chances. One of the reasons I've been able to build everything that I've been able to build is because I've been able to take chances, right? I lived with my parents all my life. Until I got married, which meant I wasn't paying rent. I wasn't paying for food. I wasn't doing for all the, paying for these things. And I remember very clearly, my dad said, "Look, you've got 3 meals a day. You got a roof over your head. You got a bed to sleep in. So if you've got this and you can't make it through school, you can't get into university, you can't do it. If you can't do it now, you'll never do it, right?"
Yeah.
And that's a reality, because when, if somebody goes into a business after having kids and all this stuff, And now there's all that pressure. So it's like, most people would look at that and say, I'm happy with my corporate job. I'm happy with my paycheck. Even though I'm not getting self-satisfaction in doing what I'm doing, I'm okay to do it because my priorities right now is to take my family to the next stage or take myself to the next stage, right? And I have, friends in my circle as well that have that mindset right now. So I'm going to make as much money as I can and climb up the ladder as quickly as I can. And ultimately, I'm passionate about having a restaurant, or I'm passionate about having, an escape it game room or whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
So I think it really comes down to the individual and what they want to do, because sometimes work can be a means to an end. And I think sometimes too, you start off with the fact that work can be a means to an end, and it turns into something else, because it evolves. It constantly evolves, right? I look at what I do today, and if you were to ask me, hey, would you be doing these things, 3, 4, 5 years ago? I would have said no. I had no idea I'd be an accountant. I'd be a financial planner. I'd be, all the things that I'm doing now. I would have never, said that these would have been my responsibilities, but here I am, right?
Do you
And I
feel
think
like is there anything you're sacrificing or anything you're missing? Or do you think of, I think about that sometimes, about what, especially when you're working hard, that you've missed out on something, or do you think about it as, you have goals in the future and of a family and, whatever hobbies, I don't know, whatever it might be that you'll do later. Does that cross your mind, or are you just in the zone? And I feel this too as well. Sometimes we're just like, I'm in the zone. I really like what I'm doing for my job. I like making an impact. I like being the determining factor in what I'm doing and driving it. So, there isn't really anything that I'm missing. Do you think you're sacrificing something to get something in the future, or do you think that you're missing out on anything by
Well,
working
I
so
mean,
hard?
in my mind, the work that I'm putting out, the things that I'm doing, to not be able to do those things, I'd be sacrificing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense,
Yeah.
right? Because this brings me satisfaction. It brings me pleasure. It gives me a sense of purpose. Getting out of bed and knowing it's not about the money, but it's about going out today and helping, families and helping agents and helping people, you know, and to see these people be successful and to come out of this. That's what's motivating for me. So when people try to pull me away from work, in my mind, it's like, well, this is what brings me happiness.
Yeah.
Going out to a movie doesn't bring me happiness. Spending time with my wife brings me happiness. So, I've drawn boundaries now in my life where it's like, okay, at a certain point, if it's an emergency, I'm available to you, but there's certain things that are important to me. Like date night's important to me. My Sundays with my family are important to me, right? Because at the end of the day, if something happens, God forbid, and I'm not around anymore, it's like, well, did I just spend, the last 33 years of my life working, and what do I have to show for now, right?
Right.
You look at it from the outside in and say, yeah, I've built this beautiful, organization and a law office, and I've got, incredible people that work with me all the time. But ultimately, I don't feel like I'm sacrificing anything, because this is what I want to be doing. And that may change. I might have a kid. Things might change. You never know. And I'm hoping that, the business will continue to evolve, and that we'll be able to continue to adapt, to be able to take the things to the next level, and to be able to do those things and have, things continue on. Because if I get hit by his bus tomorrow and the company stops operating, well, that was never a good business to begin with.
Yeah.
Right. So I've already got it set up in a way that, if something does happen, I can do what I got to do, and the company will continue to make the difference it's making, because that's the objective of the company.
Yeah, because there's this mentality, and I don't know if it's a European mentality or what it is, but it's this, we do a bunch of different things. We're diverse people. Remember that well-rounded? Remember that thing from, I don't know, high school, and when you're trying to apply to something, and he's like, oh, he's well-rounded. He's sports, and he's got this, and he's a good hard worker, and all these and we sort of think about that. And there's some reason I feel like that sort of gets ingrained in you from a young age. And as you sort of grow up, you then think about that as saying, okay, well, I need to have these hobbies, and I need to go to the gym X number of times a week, and I need to do all these things because those things sort of, those things make me happy. And but if you can love your work, is sort of where I'm coming from this, then all that you really then have to decide is how much is too much, or how much is, how much should I throttle, how much should I not. I mean, you could just put your head down and do it. But what you said interestingly at the beginning was, turning your Facebook into your business version of you, right? And if you think of, Facebook as being who you are in some way, right? Like this is your outside to the outside world. This is a part of who I am. And you just turn that into work and merge the two. Then it kind of works if what you're doing is something that you feel is your life work. If you're, I don't know, if you're a insurance actuary, sorry for all the insurance actuaries, I had to pick something. If you're an insurance actuary and you don't love your job and you really don't want to identify with it, you don't want it to be the thing that defines you, then sure, of course, you need to be well-rounded because you're going to need those other things. But if you found a career that is something that you can really resonate with and that you feel is your life's work and something that you're trying to do and achieve, then why would you stop, right? Why would you go and do something else? Why would you go to the gym if you really didn't want to, or take a vacation, or pick up this random hobby, because you've already found what you're trying to do?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And, I'm a perfect example of diversification, right? But within the same fields.
Mm-hmm.
And you look at what some other people do, and there's jobs that are no longer relevant today, right? So if you kind of put yourself in that hole and say, this is it, I don't want to expand, I don't want to learn, I don't want to take on new training and development, well, you might become obsolete one day, right? So I think what was ingrained in me at an early age was that, whether you're in school or not, like you're constantly in school, right? And you stay in school. So you keep educating, you keep training. And it's funny, I've got on my bumper sticker, it says stay in school. And people will ask me, well, does that mean go to university and this and that? And no, the objective is that, whether you're in school or not, whether it's college or university or online courses, you keep expanding your profile and you keep taking on new experiences, because you never know. Like, I'm a real estate lawyer now. I've always seen myself litigating or dealing with criminal law, but I've never delved into it, right? And so when the opportunity passes by, I may look into that and say, this is something that interests me, and I'm motivated to kind of see if there's an opportunity there. So for me, it's all about constantly learning and educating and expanding that profile, because don't know what 20 years from now will look like, right? We had, even in the legal profession, we had conveyancers. Conveyancers used to go and drop documents at the land registry office. Well, everything's electronic now. Still have conveyancers, but they're not as significant in the role. So I think you can't be complacent. You can't stop growing. You've got to keep, at least in my mind, constantly growing. Doesn't matter what you do, whether it's your family life, your personal life, your work life. What drives me is to keep taking it to the next level.
A big part of this podcast, I think, is finding happiness in what you're doing, whatever it is. And part of happiness is just setting goals and achieving them. Sort of an easy way that I like to put it is that if you're going, and to your point, I totally agree. It's if you are learning things and educating yourself and becoming more versed in things throughout the world and just what you're doing, right? And becoming more of an expert on it because you like it. That's great. Do you think, though, that, like, did you just end up in real estate? Because you sort of mentioned at the beginning, but did it have to be real estate for you? Is there an inherent thing about you, or inherent thing that you became sort of a passionate person about this, or is it more that kind of client service and sort of thing? Or not? How did you sort of decide on real estate? Because I really think of real estate as this very competitive industry. I personally probably know 4 or 5 or 6 agents of some sort that are into real estate. And if I ever sell my house, I'm going to lose a few friends here, but there's lots of people in the industry. It seems like a competitive one. Was there a particular reason why you chose it?
So no, it was something that kind of, I think I can honestly say I was pushed into it. And at that point, it made sense what I was being told. It's like, well, you do it or you don't do it. Get the education, it's worthwhile, right?
Yeah.
And so the motivation behind getting the license and getting the education was very different from the actual outcome that we're seeing today. And so, I think I've always been happy. Even when I was a telemarketer, I was happy doing it. It's weird to say this, but I've always been happy. I've always been, whatever it is I've gotten myself into, I've done it to the point where, if I'm not liking it, I'll leave. I will, unless and there have been points in my life where it's like, okay, if I don't do this, I can't pay for university. I can't help with the family. I can't do the things I want to do. So there are obviously going to be times in, I think, anybody's life where it's like, okay, I got to do this because I don't have another option right now. But if it were up to me, would I be doing something else? Sure. And I think that, over time, as we evolve and we adapt, you kind of find that sweet spot. And I think I found it. I found it with real estate. And then even with real estate, I went out and got a law degree when most agents won't do that. Most agents aren't going to say, let me go get my real estate law license, or let me get my mortgage agent license, right?
Yeah.
So there was satisfaction, yes, but there's always that burning desire, I guess, in me to keep going, right? Like even after the legal and all that, I ended up getting designations just because I was like, why not? I didn't need to spend thousands of dollars on getting, the FRI and the ABR and the SRS and all the other things, and now I'm working on another one. I didn't need to do all these things, but I think maybe I'm like a dog chasing a car at this point, where it's like, I like the run, I like the sprint, trying to chase this idea of perfection, this idea of getting that knowledge and being better than the rest, because I'm devoted to that cause.
Yeah. Do you find yourself comparing yourself to other people often? Or did you do that before and don't do that now? I'm curious.
No.
I go in and out. I don't know.
So that's an interesting question, and I think yes and no, because see, what I learned, especially when I opened this office is only 2 years old, right? I've been
Yeah.
in real estate. I've had an independent before this with 150 agents. Like I've done a lot of different things, and I think at an early point when I had a couple of these businesses up and running, I would see myself comparing myself to the local brokerages, right? And you look at the local brokerages, and if they're all failing, and that's your litmus test, then that's not really a comparison you should be making. To be satisfied that other people are failing isn't a good standard to hold yourself to, right?
No.
And I remember it's like, well, oh, this is tough. This is interesting. I got to do training. I got to spend all this time with these agents. I got to do all this stuff. And it's like, well, the guy down the road isn't doing any of this. He's got just as many agents or this or that. And I think there was a point where it kind of clicked, and it's like, well, that's not the competition. The competition is I want to build this to the point where it's a world-class company, and people look at this company and say, this is a company where you've got true professionals with specialized knowledge, and you walk in there with a problem you think you might have, you're going to come out with 3 or 4 solutions that you didn't even know existed.
Right.
And that's what it is. So now, like, other businesses, even within my franchise, within the region, you look at other businesses, and there's a point where, like, okay, this guy's got, or she's got 200 or 300 agents, I've got 99, or I've got 100 or 90 or whatever it is. But the goal isn't growth right now. The goal isn't to get 600 agents. The goal is to have 100 solid producing agents that can do the equivalent of what 600 agents can produce at a non-committed office, right? And
Yeah.
I think what we're finding with the number of agents that are operating in the GTA, we've got thousands and thousands of agents. It's very competitive, like you said. And so if you look at the average, and the average might be less than a deal a year per agent, because we don't have that many transactions relative to the population. Well, if I were to say, oh, I did one deal, the average agent's doing 0.235% of a deal. That's not really something I should be doing, right? I should be
Right.
passionate about it, and I should hold myself to a different standard, and my competition should be myself. I should be looking at being better than I was yesterday. Again, all very cliche type things that you'll read in books, but that's the reality. Like, when I wake up, it's like, am I better than I was yesterday? Did I do more than I did yesterday? And 9 times out of the 10, when I'm going to bed at night, the answer is yes, I did more. I achieved something new. I've taken it to another level, and it's constant improvement and constant reinforcement of those things.
What stresses you out the most of your job?
My personality and the type of personality I am, I'm very controlling. I have a very difficult time letting go. And you can't operate an office like this one with, around 100 agents and be a bottleneck. It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Right. So what stresses me out the most is learning to give up control. And I've had to, right? I mean, companies and the types of things that we want to do are only going to be possible if you bring in people that you trust and you let them run with it. I stress out because I'm a micromanager, and I stress out because I'm micromanaging, and I stress out because I'm not micromanaging, right?
Yeah.
And so it's very interesting, that dynamic. But at the end of the day, it's like, okay, if I bring somebody into this partnership, if I bring somebody into into the office, whether it's an admin or a clerk or whoever it is, if after doing what they're doing for 6 months or a year, if I can still do it better than they can, then that means there's a problem with who I'm bringing in, right? There should never be a point where I look at it and say, I brought you on to make offers, and I can still do an offer faster and better than you can do it, because that means that there's, either my training isn't good enough, or the person that I brought on doesn't care, quite frankly. There's something there. So the biggest challenge for me, the biggest stressor for me, is that for me to keep scaling and to keep providing the services that people are accustomed to receiving at this office, I have to let go. And that in itself is very stressful, because it means that I overanalyze every interview. I sit down and I'll have 15, 20 interviews, and it's like, no, and I'll always find flaws. And I have to recognize, and it's stressful for me to recognize this, given my personality, that some of the flaws that I'm expressing onto the candidates are flaws in me. And I have to learn that, people that want to make a difference will be attracted to companies like mine. And I've got to believe in them and let them run with it. And that's stressful.
Because do you think about the happiness of your employees and the motivations and what drives them, and in particular when you're doing an interview? Is there a certain prototype or something that you are sort of looking for that sort of works well in your organization?
It's interesting. When I interview a potential candidate that's going to work with the office, everybody always says, well, are you looking at education as a qualifying criteria? Is high school required? Is university required? Do you care? My answer is no. If you genuinely, as a human being, want to learn and grow and adapt and evolve, I can take anybody that's committed to the cause and I can make them perfect at what they do.
Yeah.
I'll give them so much value and so much support on my end that they will have the opportunity of being better than anybody else at it. And that's what it is. So when I'm sitting down with somebody, I'm not looking at, okay, did they graduate from Ryerson? Did they graduate from U of T? I don't care. My main criteria is, are you honest? Do you really want to work here? Are you going to be passionate about this if these are the duties that you're going to have to deal with? And do you see yourself being here for the rest of your life? Can you really see yourself working here for the rest of your life? I like to, it's a word that you see sometimes. I'm looking for lifers. I want people that come in and contribute and stick with the company like me. We're in it. We're all in it together.
Yeah.
And I don't lose employees. I don't lose, they're like partners to me, and what they say, what they do, it's very important to me. I take that feedback very critically.
Interesting. Do you think about sort of the future? And you mentioned once a kid, or potentially, or having kids, a dog maybe. Do you ever think about selling the business, retiring? Does that ever kind of cross your mind?
That's a tough one, right? Like I've got a lot of things going on now. There's there's a thought in my mind that if I were to sell it or give it up and let somebody else take over, there's always that thought in my mind that it'll fail, right?
Yeah.
Because like when you look at the hours I'm putting in, especially in the beginning, like it's gotten better now, but I was working 12 to 18 hours a day. And that's what it looked like. So that was the better part of my life for several years, and I got used to that. And then then I got married and things happened and things started changing. And then there's different perspectives as you kind of grow and go through these different milestones, I guess, in your lifetime. And at this point, I think I wouldn't consider selling, because I wouldn't be selling for the money. That's for sure. It wouldn't be about the money at this point. I've never done this for the money.
Yeah.
I think that's why it is successful, because it's never been about, everybody's got to make money and we've got a bottom line and we've got to do what's in the interest of the company, but that's not the sole motivation behind operating this office. And so I think the only thing in my mind that would result in the sale is if somebody could help me take this to another level and provide services on a wider scale than I'm able to provide them. That's the only time at this point in my life where I would consider merging or looking at an acquisition type of scenario.
Gotcha. Interesting. Okay. Well, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you sort of joining me. It was good. Lots of cool topics about working hard. Makes me a little bit want to go and just keep working here. You kind of convinced me. If I don't, this isn't about selling your services whatsoever. But if you would like, how could people sort of get in contact with you or follow you or find you? I've seen your social media presence increase too, especially lately. So feel free to plug that.
Yeah, you can definitely search me on Google. You'll find pages of stuff now. So it's Ricky Rathore, Ricky. Last name is Rathore. And if anybody wants to talk or have a conversation, I'm at 416-731-8478.
Amazing. All right. Thank you very much, Ricky.
My pleasure.
Good
Thank you
chatting.
for having me.
Thanks.
All right, all the best.
So I made a mistake right at the end of this interview that I'm not too happy about. I did ask him about kids at the end, and he didn't answer the question, though he sort of referenced it earlier, and I wish I pushed him on it a little bit harder. But instead of that, he then started talking about selling his business and probably his disinterest in doing that. And I'm an M&A guy, and I didn't. That's what I've done. My whole life has been about mergers and acquisitions. My whole professional life, anyways. And I didn't kind of elongate the discussion or get into that. But just for the record, that is what M&A is all about. It is about selling to grow and selling to an organization or working with other organizations to help together grow your businesses. So I didn't talk about that though. I didn't get into that. Next time I totally will. We will talk about M&A. I definitely do miss it. But I hope for the general conversation here with Ricky that you enjoyed the interview and saw his passion. Really, what he said in that interview is it has nothing to do with real estate. I think he sort of mentioned that he's just kind of always been passionate about whatever he's done and super driven to do them well, set goals for himself, etc. And I don't know, I just get the really sense that he loves it because it's his business. He's motivated. He just really likes coming to work every day, and that I think is a good thing. And I think we need to in ourselves think about that if we are that passionate and how hard we are working. If we do get to the stage where you're that passionate about it and you do love work so much, it's not a bad thing. You can juggle your life and you can figure out what else you want to achieve as well. But working too hard or working really hard isn't a bad thing. But if you don't love it and you're on the flip side and you do want to find something else, then yeah, then maybe you do need to juggle. Maybe you should read Tim Ferriss's book, The 4 Hour Work Week, and decide how you can have a better sort of work-life balance. Because I do think that no matter what, you need to have those things in your life that you're super passionate about. In his case, it's work, but it's not the same for everyone. Thanks for listening. That concludes this podcast. Please review me on whatever podcasting platform you want. Just go do a star thing. You don't even have to write anything. Just give me a review. That would be super, super helpful to me. And until we see you next time, don't worry, be happy.